Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the marble corridors of Meridian Corporate Tower in downtown Chicago at 5:30 a.m., just as he had every morning for the past 8 years. The 42-year-old janitor took pride in his work, arriving early to ensure the building's executive floors were spotless before the first employees arrived. Despite earning barely above minimum wage, Marcus treated his job with the same dedication most people reserved for careers that paid 10 times as much. "Morning, Mr. Williams," called out Elena Rodriguez, a young administrative assistant who often arrived early to prepare for her demanding boss. "You're here bright and early as always." Marcus smiled warmly, pausing to empty the wastebasket near her desk. "Good morning, Elena. How's your son doing? Last time we talked, he was having trouble with his math homework." "Oh, you remembered. He's doing much better, actually. Those extra practice problems you suggested really helped." "Thank you for caring enough to ask." This was typical Marcus, remembering personal details about the building's employees, offering encouragement, and treating everyone with genuine kindness regardless of their position in the corporate hierarchy. Executives often dismissed him as part of the furniture, but the support staff knew Marcus as someone who celebrated their successes and offered comfort during difficult times. As Marcus continued his rounds on the 15th floor, he noticed the lights were already on in the corner office, belonging to Richard Blackstone, Senior Vice President of Operations. This was unusual. Blackstone rarely arrived before 9 a.m. and was known for his long lunch breaks and early departures. Marcus knocked gently on the doorframe. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackstone. I didn't expect anyone to be here this early. Should I come back later to clean your office?" Blackstone looked up from his computer with barely concealed annoyance. "Williams, actually, I'm glad you're here. We need to have a conversation." Marcus set down his spray bottle, immediately sensing tension. "Is there a problem with my work, sir?" "There's been a complaint filed against you for theft. Security footage allegedly shows you removing items from offices without authorization." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake. I've never stolen anything from this building. I take my job very seriously." Blackstone pulled out a folder containing what appeared to be printed screenshots from security cameras. "These images show you taking items from various offices over the past month. Cash, office supplies, even personal belongings from desks." Marcus studied the blurry black and white images, his confusion growing. The person in the photos was wearing janitorial uniforms and appeared to be roughly his height and build, but the image quality was too poor to make out facial features clearly. "Mr. Blackstone, I understand why you might think this is me, but I promise you it isn't. Could we review the actual video footage? Maybe get a clearer look at this person's face. The IT department says the original video files were corrupted. These screenshots are all we have." Blackstone's tone was matter-of-fact, as if he'd already made his decision. "Williams, you've been with the company for 8 years, and up until now your record has been clean. However, theft is a serious offense that we cannot overlook. Sir, please, this job means everything to me. I have a daughter in college, and I've been saving for years to help her with expenses. I would never jeopardize that by stealing from the company." Blackstone stood up, his expression unchanged. "I'm sorry, Williams, but effective immediately. Your employment with Meridian Cleaning Services is terminated. Security will escort you out of the building, and your final paycheck will be mailed to your home address." Marcus felt the world spinning around him. 8 years of dedicated service, perfect attendance, and genuine care for his work were being erased by grainy photographs that didn't even clearly show his face. "Mr. Blackstone, could I at least speak with Mr. Peterson about this?" Marcus referred to David Peterson, the building's general manager who had always treated him with respect. "He's known me for years. He could vouch for my character. Peterson is out of town this week. This decision has been made at the highest levels of management." Blackstone pressed a button on his phone. "Security to the 15th floor, please." As Marcus waited for security to arrive, he tried one more time to appeal to Blackstone's sense of fairness. "Sir, I understand you have to investigate theft allegations, but couldn't you at least suspend me pending a more thorough investigation? These photos don't prove anything conclusive. Williams, I appreciate your 8 years of service, but the evidence is clear enough for our purposes. The company can't afford to keep employees who are under suspicion for theft." 2 security guards arrived and politely but firmly escorted Marcus to his locker in the basement. As he gathered his few personal belongings, a thermos, a photo of his daughter Sarah at her college graduation, and a small plant that Eleanor had given him for his birthday. Marcus felt humiliated and confused. "I'm sorry about this, Marcus," said Jerry Patterson, the head of security who had known Marcus for years. "This doesn't feel right to me, but orders are orders." "Jerry, you know I would never steal from this building. I've had access to expensive equipment and petty cash for years, and I've never taken so much as a paper clip." "I know, Marcus, I know." Jerry's voice carried genuine regret. "Something about this whole situation stinks, but I'm not in a position to question management decisions." As Marcus walked out of Meridian Corporate Tower for what he assumed would be the last time, carrying a small cardboard box containing his possessions, he felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and determination. He had been treated unfairly, but he wasn't going to let this injustice define him. What Marcus didn't know was that his termination was part of a larger scheme orchestrated by Blackstone to cover up his own financial misconduct. The blurry security photos had been deliberately edited to implicate Marcus, and the corrupted video files had been intentionally destroyed to prevent closer examination. Blackstone had been embezzling money from the building's operational budget for months, using Marcus as a convenient scapegoat when the missing funds were discovered during a routine audit. The plan was simple: blame the thefts on the janitor, terminate him before anyone could investigate too deeply, and hope the matter would be forgotten. But Richard Blackstone had made two critical mistakes. First, he had underestimated Marcus Williams's character and determination. Second, he had no idea who Marcus really was outside of his janitorial uniform. As Marcus drove home to his modest apartment, he made a phone call that would change everything. "Hello, Dad? It's Marcus. I think it's time to come home." Chapter 2. The Return. Marcus sat in his small apartment that evening, staring at his laptop screen as he composed an email he never thought he would write. For 8 years, he had lived a simple life as a janitor, finding satisfaction in honest work and genuine human connections. But his wrongful termination had forced him to confront a truth he had been avoiding. Sometimes justice required more than just being a good person. The email was addressed to Margaret Williams, CEO of Williams & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious private equity firms. Margaret was Marcus's younger sister, and she had been trying to convince him to join the family business for over a decade. "Maggie, I know you're going to say, 'I told you so,' but I think it's time to accept your offer. Something happened today that made me realize I can't change the system from the bottom if the people at the top are determined to abuse their power. I'm ready to come back to the world I left behind, but I want to do things differently this time. Let's talk tomorrow." Your stubborn older brother, Marcus had graduated from Harvard Business School 15 years earlier and had been on track for a brilliant career in corporate finance. But after watching his first employer destroy a small family business through a hostile takeover, he had become disillusioned with the corporate world's disregard for human consequences. Against his family's wishes and advice from friends, Marcus had walked away from a 6-figure salary to find work that felt meaningful rather than profitable. He had chosen janitorial work specifically because it allowed him to serve others while staying connected to the corporate world he had rejected. For 8 years, Marcus had observed the culture of Meridian Corporate Tower from a unique perspective. He had seen which executives treated employees with respect and which ones viewed staff as disposable resources. He had witnessed ethical compromises, observed leadership failures, and noted opportunities for improvement that went unnoticed by those focused solely on quarterly profits. Now, thanks to Blackstone's betrayal, Marcus was about to use that knowledge in ways no one could have anticipated. His phone rang at 10 p.m. The caller ID showed his sister's number. "Marcus, I just read your email. Are you serious about this?" Margaret Williams was 38 years old, brilliant, and had built a reputation as one of the most ethical private equity managers in Chicago. Her firm specialized in acquiring underperforming companies and improving them through better management, rather than cost-cutting and layoffs. "I'm serious, Maggie, but I have conditions." "What kind of conditions?" Marcus looked around his modest apartment, thinking about Elena's son struggling with math homework, Jerry's regret about following unjust orders, and his own daughter working 2 jobs to help pay for college. "I want to target companies where management is abusing their employees or engaging in unethical practices. I want to fix broken corporate cultures, not just improve profit margins." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, that's exactly the kind of work our firm specializes in. But are you sure you're ready to return to this world? You've been very clear about why you left. I left because I was young and idealistic and thought I could change the world by walking away from problems. Now I realize that change requires engagement, not withdrawal. What happened today that changed your mind? Marcus told his sister about his termination, the fabricated evidence, and Blackstone's refusal to conduct a fair investigation. As he spoke, he could hear Margaret's anger building on the other end of the phone. Marcus, that's textbook wrongful termination. You could sue them and probably win a significant settlement. I don't want their money, Maggie. I want justice for everyone Blackstone is mistreating, not just myself. What do you have in mind? Marcus had been thinking about this question since leaving the building that morning. Meridian Corporate Tower is managed by Blackstone Development Corporation. I want to acquire it. Margaret was silent for several seconds. Marcus, do you understand what you're proposing? A hostile takeover of a major real estate management company? Not hostile. Strategic. I've been observing their operations for 8 years. I know where their weaknesses are, which of their practices are creating legal liability, and how their treatment of employees is affecting their bottom line. And you think you can convince our investors to fund an acquisition based on your experience as their janitor? Marcus smiled for the first time since his termination. I think I can convince them to fund an acquisition based on my Harvard MBA, my 8 years of operational intelligence, and your firm's track record of successful corporate turnarounds. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Williams & Associates wearing a suit he hadn't touched in 8 years. The reception area was elegant but not ostentatious, reflecting Margaret's philosophy that success should be measured by impact rather than display. Mr. Williams, your sister is waiting for you in the conference room, said the receptionist, who clearly had no idea she was addressing the company founder's brother, who had been working as a janitor for nearly a decade. Margaret greeted Marcus with a hug and immediately introduced him to her senior partners. Everyone, I want you to meet my brother Marcus, who will be joining our team as a senior analyst specializing in operational improvements and corporate culture transformation. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus presented his analysis of Blackstone Development Corporation with the thoroughness of someone who had been conducting industrial espionage for 8 years. He knew their cleaning contracts, maintenance schedules, employee turnover rates, tenant satisfaction scores, and operational inefficiencies in detail that impressed even experienced private equity professionals. Marcus, said James Chen, Margaret's senior partner, this level of operational intelligence is remarkable, but what makes you think we can acquire a company this size? Blackstone Development manages over 50 properties across the Midwest. Because they're vulnerable in ways that aren't visible from the outside, Marcus replied, advancing to his final slide. Employee turnover is over 60% annually, which is destroying their operational efficiency. They're facing multiple lawsuits for discrimination and wrongful termination. Their largest client is considering canceling their contract due to service quality issues. Margaret leaned forward with interest. How do you know about the client concerns? Because I've been cleaning their offices and listening to their phone calls for 8 years, not intentionally eavesdropping, but executives often forget that service workers are present and capable of understanding business conversations. And you think we can use this information to make a competitive acquisition offer? Marcus nodded. I think we can make an offer that saves their current owners from a company that's hemorrhaging money and reputation, and then we can fix the underlying problems that are causing their failures. That afternoon, Margaret called an emergency meeting with her investors to present Marcus's proposal. The acquisition would require significant capital, but the potential returns were substantial if they could turn around Blackstone Development's operations. Ladies and gentlemen, Margaret announced to the group of investors, I want to introduce you to our newest senior analyst, Marcus Williams. He's going to explain why we should acquire a company that fired him yesterday. As Marcus began his presentation, he thought about Elena struggling to support her son, Jerry following orders he knew were wrong, and his own daughter working multiple jobs to afford college. The corporate world he had rejected 8 years earlier was about to become his tool for creating the kind of workplace he believed everyone deserved. Richard Blackstone had made the mistake of underestimating the man he had wrongfully terminated. By tomorrow, Marcus Williams would be in a position to fire him instead. The kind janitor was about to become the boss, and his first priority would be creating a company culture based on respect, fairness, and genuine care for all employees, from the CEO to the cleaning staff. Chapter 3. The acquisition. 3 weeks after Marcus's termination, Richard Blackstone sat in his corner office, reviewing what he believed were the final details of covering up his embezzlement scheme. The janitor theft story had been accepted by upper management, the missing funds had been attributed to Marcus's alleged crimes, and Blackstone was confident that his financial misconduct would never be discovered. His confidence was shattered when his secretary buzzed him on the intercom. "Mr. Blackstone, there are several gentlemen here from Williams & Associates who say they have an appointment with you regarding the Meridian Corporate Tower Management contract." Blackstone frowned. Williams & Associates was one of Chicago's most respected private equity firms, but he had no scheduled meetings with them. "I don't have anything on my calendar. Tell them they'll need to reschedule through proper channels." "Sir, they say it's regarding an immediate acquisition offer for Blackstone Development Corporation. They seem to think it's quite urgent." Blackstone felt his blood pressure spike. An acquisition offer? His company wasn't for sale, and he certainly hadn't been expecting any buyout proposals. Send them in, but this better not be some kind of elaborate sales pitch. 5 minutes later, Margaret Williams entered his office, followed by her senior partner James Chen, and a man in an expensive suit whom Blackstone didn't immediately recognize. Something about the third man seemed familiar, but Blackstone couldn't place him. "Mr. Blackstone, thank you for seeing us without an appointment," Margaret said, settling into one of the chairs across from his desk. "I'm Margaret Williams, CEO of Williams & Associates. This is my partner, James Chen, and this is our senior analyst, Marcus Williams." When Marcus removed his sunglasses, Blackstone's face went white. The janitor he had fired 3 weeks earlier was sitting in his office wearing a $1,000 suit and representing one of the most powerful investment firms in the city. "What the hell is this?" Blackstone demanded, his composure completely shattered. Marcus smiled calmly. "This is a business meeting, Mr. Blackstone. We're here to discuss acquiring your company." "You're a janitor. I fired you for theft." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Blackstone, my brother holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and has 8 years of operational experience with your company. I think you might be confusing him with someone else." "Your brother?" Blackstone's mind was reeling as he tried to process what was happening. "Yes, Marcus has been conducting what you might call deep cover operational analysis of your business practices for the past 8 years. His insights into your company's inefficiencies and vulnerabilities have been quite valuable in developing our acquisition strategy." James Chen opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Mr. Blackstone, we're prepared to offer $47 million for Blackstone Development Corporation, which represents a 15% premium over your company's current market valuation." "The company isn't for sale," Blackstone said weakly, but his protest lacked conviction. He knew his company was in financial trouble, and a $47 million offer was more than he had ever expected to receive. Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable authority. "Richard, let me explain your situation. Your company is facing 3 wrongful termination lawsuits, including one that will be filed by me next week. Your employee turnover rate is destroying your operational efficiency. Your largest client, Morrison Properties, is considering terminating their contract due to service quality issues. How could you possibly know about Morrison Properties? Because I've been cleaning their offices for 8 years and listening to their conversations about finding a new building management company." Margaret continued the presentation. "Mr. Blackstone, our offer represents your best opportunity to exit a company that's heading toward bankruptcy. We're prepared to complete the transaction within 30 days, and we're offering you a consulting contract that would allow you to maintain income while transitioning out of day-to-day operations." "This is insane. You can't just walk in here and demand to buy my company because you think I treated your brother unfairly." Marcus's expression hardened slightly. "This isn't about my treatment, Richard. This is about a pattern of management failures that are destroying your company's value and harming hundreds of employees. I've watched you create a toxic workplace culture for 8 years, and now I'm in a position to fix it. By taking over my company. By saving it from your mismanagement." James Chen placed several documents on Blackstone's desk. "These are detailed financial analyses showing how your company's practices are creating legal liability and operational inefficiency. We believe we can increase profitability by 40% within 2 years simply by improving employee relations and operational procedures." Blackstone reviewed the documents with growing alarm. The analysis was more thorough and accurate than anything his own management team had produced. Every weakness, every problem, every questionable decision was documented with precision that could only come from someone with intimate knowledge of the company's operations. "Where did you get this information?" Marcus smiled. "From 8 years of being invisible to management while being trusted by the people who actually make your company function. The administrative assistants, security guards, maintenance workers, and cleaning staff know everything about how this company really operates." "Are you threatening me?" Margaret's voice remained professional but carried a steel edge. "Mr. Blackstone, we're offering you a dignified exit from a company that's failing under your leadership. The alternative is watching your business collapse while facing multiple lawsuits and regulatory investigations." "What regulatory investigations?" Marcus and Margaret exchanged glances. "Richard, did you think we wouldn't notice the discrepancies in your operational budget reports? The missing funds that you blamed on me?" Blackstone felt sick. His embezzlement scheme, which he thought was perfectly concealed, was apparently known to these people, who had access to information he never suspected they could obtain. "I don't know what you're talking about." James Chen opened another folder. "Mr. Blackstone, we have documentation showing that approximately $180,000 in operational funds have been diverted from their intended purposes over the past 18 months. The pattern of these diversions corresponds exactly with your personal financial activities." "How could you possibly have access to that information?" "Because when you fire someone wrongfully and then refuse to provide proper documentation, that person tends to become very motivated to discover the real reason for their termination," Marcus explained. "I hired a forensic accountant to investigate whether my firing was related to financial irregularities in the company." Margaret stood up. "Mr. Blackstone, you have 24 hours to consider our offer. If you decline, we'll proceed with a hostile takeover, while simultaneously providing our evidence of financial misconduct to the appropriate authorities." "You can't prove anything." Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small recording device. "Actually, Richard, I can prove quite a lot. Did you know that Illinois is a one-party consent state for recording conversations? That conversation we had 3 weeks ago when you fired me. I recorded every word." Blackstone's face went ashen as he realized the implications. If Marcus had recorded their conversation, then there was evidence of Blackstone's knowledge about the corrupted video files and his refusal to conduct a proper investigation. "What do you want from me?" "We want you to accept our acquisition offer, cooperate with the transition and resign from any operational role in the company," Margaret replied. "In exchange, we'll structure the deal in a way that allows you to retain some financial benefit while avoiding criminal prosecution for embezzlement." "And if I refuse?" Marcus stood up, his transformation from humble janitor to corporate executive complete. "Then you'll face criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and the complete destruction of your professional reputation. Your choice, Richard." As the Williams & Associates team prepared to leave, Marcus turned back to Blackstone one final time. "Richard, 8 years ago, you could have treated me with basic human dignity. You could have acknowledged my contributions to this company. You could have investigated my termination fairly. Instead, you chose to use me as a scapegoat for your own crimes. Now I'm offering you more consideration than you ever showed me or any other employee in this building. I suggest you take it." That evening, Blackstone sat alone in his office, staring at the acquisition documents and trying to figure out how his perfectly planned cover-up had turned into a complete disaster. The janitor he had dismissed as insignificant had somehow become the instrument of his professional destruction. At 11:47 p.m., Blackstone's lawyer called with advice that sealed his fate. "Richard, take the deal. If even half of what they're claiming is true, you're looking at federal prison time if you fight this." 24 hours after receiving the acquisition offer, Richard Blackstone signed the documents that transferred control of his company to Williams & Associates, with Marcus Williams designated as the new CEO. The kind janitor had become the boss, and his first order of business would be creating the kind of workplace where no employee would ever be treated the way he had been. Chapter 4. The New Management. Marcus Williams walked through the familiar corridors of Meridian Corporate Tower on his first day as CEO of the newly acquired building management company, now renamed Meridian Excellence Corporation. The same hallways where he had pushed a cleaning cart for 8 years now welcomed him as the person responsible for the livelihoods of over 300 employees across 53 properties. His first stop was the Human Resources Department, where he had scheduled a meeting with Linda Morrison, the HR director who had processed his termination paperwork just 4 weeks earlier. "Mr. Williams," Linda said nervously as Marcus entered her office, "I want to apologize for how your termination was handled. I should have insisted on a more thorough investigation." Marcus settled into the chair across from her desk, the same chair where he had sat as a janitor being accused of theft. "Linda, you were following orders from your supervisor, but now we're going to implement policies that ensure no employee faces the kind of treatment I experienced." "What did you have in mind?" Marcus pulled out a tablet containing the comprehensive reform plan he had developed. "First, we're implementing a 3-tier investigation process for any employee accused of misconduct. No one gets terminated without clear evidence and proper due process." "That makes sense. What else?" "We're creating an employee advocacy position, someone whose job is to ensure fair treatment regardless of an employee's position in the company hierarchy. We're also implementing an anonymous reporting system for employees who witness unethical behavior by management." Linda reviewed Marcus's proposals with growing admiration. "Mr. Williams, these policies would make us one of the most employee-friendly companies in the industry." "That's the goal, Linda. I learned during my 8 years here that companies succeed when employees feel valued and protected. We're going to prove that treating people well is good business." Marcus's next meeting was with Jerry Patterson, the head of security who had reluctantly escorted him from the building during his termination. "Marcus," Jerry said, standing up as his former colleague entered the security office, "I can't tell you how good it feels to see you back here as the boss. What happened to you was wrong, and I've felt guilty about it ever since. Jerry, you were doing your job. But now we're going to make sure that your job includes protecting employees from unfair treatment, not just enforcing management decisions." "What do you mean?" Marcus sat down at the conference table, where security staff held their daily briefings. "I want to expand the security department's role to include employee safety and workplace fairness. If someone reports that they're being harassed, discriminated against, or treated unfairly, security will investigate and document the situation." "So we'd be like internal affairs for corporate misconduct." "Exactly. And Jerry, I want you to lead this new division. You have the respect of employees throughout the building, and you understand the difference between following orders and doing what's right." Jerry's face showed both pride and determination. "Marcus, I promise you that no employee will ever be escorted out of this building without proper justification again." That afternoon, Marcus called an all-hands meeting in the building's main conference center. Word had spread quickly that the former janitor had somehow become the new CEO, and the room was packed with curious and nervous employees. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, standing at the podium where executives had delivered countless corporate presentations over the years, "my name is Marcus Williams, and 4 weeks ago, I was wrongfully terminated from my position as a janitor in this building." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Many employees had heard about Marcus's firing, but few understood the circumstances or his background. "Today, I stand before you as the new CEO of this company. I want to share with you how this happened and what it means for all of us going forward." Marcus told his story with honesty and humility, explaining his business background, his choice to work as a janitor, his wrongful termination, and his family's acquisition of the company. But more importantly, he outlined his vision for creating a workplace where every employee was treated with dignity and respect. "I've had the unique experience of working in this building, both as an invisible service worker and now as the person ultimately responsible for everyone's employment," Marcus continued. "I've seen how the company operates from every angle, and I'm here to tell you that we're going to do things differently." Elena Rodriguez, the administrative assistant who had always been kind to Marcus, raised her hand. "Mr. Williams, what exactly do you mean by differently?" "Elena, I mean that we're going to create a company where your son's math homework is as important to management as our quarterly profit reports, where Jerry doesn't have to choose between following orders and doing what's right, where no one gets fired without clear evidence and fair process." Another employee called out, "What happened to Mr. Blackstone?" Marcus's expression remained professional but serious. "Mr. Blackstone chose to resign and accept a consulting role with limited responsibilities. The investigation into the circumstances of my termination revealed some practices that were not in the best interest of the company or its employees." "Will there be layoffs?" asked a maintenance worker from the back of the room. "Absolutely not. In fact, we're planning to hire additional staff, and increase wages across all positions. I learned during my 8 years here that this company's success depends entirely on the dedication and hard work of people like all of you. Investing in employees is investing in our future. After the meeting, Marcus was approached by dozens of employees who had stories about unfair treatment, workplace harassment, or concerns they had been afraid to voice under the previous management. Each conversation reinforced his conviction that corporate culture could be transformed from the top down. "Mr. Williams," said Carlos Martinez, a security guard who worked the night shift, "I just want you to know that you always treated me with respect when you were working nights. It means everything to have someone in charge who actually knows what it's like to do our jobs." Marcus shook Carlos's hand warmly. "Carlos, that respect is going to be the foundation of how we operate going forward. Everyone in this building matters, and everyone's voice will be heard." That evening, Marcus stayed late in his new executive office, reviewing personnel files and planning the comprehensive changes he wanted to implement. His assistant knocked on the door at 8 p.m. "Mr. Williams, your sister is here to see you." Margaret entered the office carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose business instincts had been proven correct. "So how does it feel to be back in the corporate world?" she asked, settling into one of the chairs facing Marcus's desk. "It feels like I'm finally in a position to create the kind of workplace I always wanted to see," Marcus replied. "Maggie, we're going to prove that treating employees well isn't just morally right, it's profitable." "I believe you're right. But Marcus, I have to ask, are you sure you're not doing this just for revenge against Blackstone?" Marcus considered his sister's question carefully. 3 weeks ago, I might have said this was about justice for what Blackstone did to me. But after talking to employees today, I realize this is about justice for everyone who's been mistreated by corporate cultures that view people as disposable resources. And Blackstone. Blackstone is learning that there are consequences for abusing power and betraying trust, but he's also getting a second chance to rebuild his career in a way that doesn't harm other people. That's more consideration than he showed me, but it's the right thing to do. Margaret smiled, recognizing the wisdom and maturity her brother had gained during his years away from the corporate world. "Marcus, I think you're going to revolutionize how this industry treats its employees. And I think you're going to be very successful in the process. That's the plan, Maggie. Turn basic human decency into a competitive advantage." As Marcus prepared to leave his office that night, he walked through the same corridors where he had worked as a janitor just weeks earlier. But now, instead of cleaning up after others, he was cleaning up the corporate culture itself, transforming a workplace built on fear and hierarchy into one based on respect and mutual investment in each other's success. The kind janitor had become the boss, and he was about to prove that kindness could be the most powerful business strategy of all. Chapter 5. The Transformation. 6 months after taking over as CEO of Meridian Excellence Corporation, Marcus Williams stood in the building's newly renovated employee break room, watching as Elena Rodriguez helped her son Carlos with his homework at one of the study tables Marcus had installed. The sight filled him with satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of workplace environment he had envisioned when he first outlined his reforms. "Mr. Williams," Elena called out as she noticed him, "I can't thank you enough for creating this space. Being able to bring Carlos here after school while I finish work has been a lifesaver." "That's exactly why we built it, Elena. No parent should have to choose between caring for their children and doing their job well." The employee break room was just one of dozens of changes Marcus had implemented since taking control of the company. The space featured comfortable seating, study areas for employees' children, a small library, and even a quiet room for nursing mothers. What had once been a sterile, unwelcoming building had been transformed into a place where people genuinely wanted to spend their time. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "Morrison Properties executives here for the contract renewal meeting. Conference Room A." This was the meeting Marcus had been preparing for since his first day as CEO. Morrison Properties was Meridian's largest client, managing a portfolio worth over $200 million, and their contract was up for renewal. Under Blackstone's management, Morrison had been considering terminating their relationship due to poor service quality and high employee turnover. "Elena, wish me luck. I'm about to find out if treating employees well actually translates to better business results." "You don't need luck, Mr. Williams. You've already proven it works." In Conference Room A, Marcus found himself facing the same Morrison Properties executives whose conversations he had overheard for years while cleaning their offices. The irony wasn't lost on him as he sat at the head of the conference table where he had once emptied wastebaskets. "Mr. Williams," said Janet Morrison, the company's CEO, "I have to admit, when we heard that Blackstone Development had been acquired and that the new CEO was a former janitor, we were skeptical about the transition. I understand your concerns, Ms. Morrison, but I hope our performance over the past 6 months has addressed those doubts." James Patterson, Morrison's Director of Operations, opened his folder of performance metrics. "Mr. Williams, the improvement in service quality has been remarkable. Maintenance response times have decreased by 60%, tenant satisfaction scores have increased by 45%, and we've received 0 complaints about cleaning or security services." Marcus smiled, remembering all the complaints that had piled up under Blackstone's management. "We've focused on empowering our frontline employees to solve problems immediately rather than forcing everything through layers of bureaucracy." "How did you achieve such dramatic improvements so quickly?" Janet asked. "We started by listening to the people who actually do the work. Our maintenance staff knew exactly what equipment they needed to be more efficient, but they'd never been asked. Our cleaning crews had suggestions for improving service quality, but management never solicited their input. Our security team understood the building's vulnerabilities, but their recommendations were ignored." Marcus clicked to his first slide, showing employee satisfaction surveys from before and after his reforms. "When you treat employees as partners, rather than just costs to be minimized, they become invested in the company's success." "The results speak for themselves," James admitted, "but Mr. Williams, we're curious about the financial impact of your employee-focused policies. Aren't higher wages and expanded benefits eating into your profit margins?" Marcus had been preparing for this question since his first day as CEO. "Actually, our profitability has increased by 32% since implementing these changes." The Morrison executives looked skeptical. "How is that possible with higher labor costs?" "Because employee turnover dropped from 67% annually to 12%. Recruiting, hiring, and training new employees costs approximately $8,000 per position. When you reduce turnover by 80%, those savings alone cover the cost of wage increases." Marcus advanced to his next slide, showing detailed financial analysis. "Additionally, experienced employees are more efficient, make fewer mistakes, and require less supervision. Our productivity per employee has increased by 28%. Janet leaned forward with obvious interest. "Mr. Williams, are you saying that treating employees better actually improved your bottom line?" "I'm saying that investing in employees is the most profitable decision a company can make. Happy employees provide better service, which leads to happier clients, which leads to contract renewals and referrals." "Speaking of contract renewals," James said, "we've been so impressed with the service improvements that we're prepared to extend our contract for 5 years and expand it to include 3 additional properties." Marcus felt a surge of vindication. The approach that traditional corporate thinking dismissed as soft was proving to be the most effective business strategy he had ever implemented. "Ms. Morrison, we'd be honored to continue our partnership and take on additional properties, but I want you to know that our service quality will continue to improve as our employees become even more experienced and invested in your success." After the Morrison executives left, Marcus walked through the building to observe the afternoon shift change. The transformation was visible everywhere. Employees greeted each other warmly, shared information about ongoing projects, and took obvious pride in their work. He stopped by the security desk where Jerry Patterson was briefing his evening crew. "Jerry, how are the new workplace fairness protocols working out?" "Marcus, it's been amazing. We've had 12 reports of potential workplace issues, and we've been able to resolve all of them before they became serious problems. Employees feel comfortable coming forward because they know they'll be heard and protected." "Any pushback from middle management about the new policies?" Jerry's expression grew more serious. "Some of the supervisors who thrived under Blackstone's authoritarian style have been resistant. They're used to managing through intimidation and don't know how to motivate people through respect and support." This was the challenge Marcus had been anticipating. While frontline employees had embraced the new culture enthusiastically, some managers who had advanced under the previous system were struggling to adapt to leadership styles based on collaboration rather than control. "Jerry, I want you to document any managers who are resisting the cultural changes. We may need to provide additional training or make some personnel adjustments. That evening, Marcus received a call from Margaret about quarterly financial reports. Marcus, the numbers are incredible. Revenue is up 18%, costs are down 12%, and client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. You've turned this company around faster than we projected. It wasn't that hard, Maggie. I just implemented the management practices that I wished I had experienced as an employee. Don't be modest. You've proven that there's a better way to run a company, and other firms are starting to take notice. We've received 3 acquisition inquiries from companies that want to replicate your success. Marcus was surprised. Really? What kind of companies? Property management firms, cleaning services, even some manufacturing companies. They want to know how you've achieved such dramatic improvements in both employee satisfaction and financial performance. Are you interested in expanding this model to other acquisitions? Margaret's voice carried excitement. Marcus, I think we could revolutionize entire industries by proving that employee-centered management is more profitable than traditional authoritarian approaches. As Marcus hung up the phone, he reflected on how far he had come from the night he was wrongfully terminated. What had started as a quest for personal justice had evolved into a mission to transform corporate culture on a much larger scale. His phone rang again. This time it was his daughter Sarah, calling from her graduate program at Northwestern. Dad, I just saw the article about your company in the Chicago Tribune business section. From janitor to CEO, a revolutionary approach to corporate leadership. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, sweetheart. I hope this proves that setbacks can become comebacks if you don't give up on your principles. Dad, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret spending 8 years as a janitor instead of pursuing your business career? Marcus looked around his office, thinking about Elena's son doing homework in the break room, Jerry's team preventing workplace conflicts before they escalated, and the dozens of employees who now felt valued and respected in their jobs. Sarah, those 8 years taught me more about leadership and human dignity than any business school ever could. I wouldn't change a day of it. Even the wrongful termination. Marcus smiled, remembering Blackstone's shock when he learned who he had really fired. Especially the wrongful termination. It gave me the motivation to fight for justice and the opportunity to prove that kindness is the strongest form of leadership. As Marcus prepared to leave his office that night, he made his final rounds through the building, not to clean it, but to observe the culture he had created. The transformation was complete. Fear had been replaced by trust, hierarchy had given way to collaboration, and a workplace that had once been a source of stress for hundreds of employees had become a source of pride and purpose. The kind janitor had become the boss, and he had proven that treating people well wasn't just the right thing to do, it was the smartest thing to do. Chapter 6. Ripple Effects. 1 year after taking control of Meridian Excellence Corporation, Marcus Williams found himself in the unexpected position of being featured on the cover of Harvard Business Review with the headline, "The Janitor's Revolution: How Employee-First Leadership is Transforming Corporate America." The article had sparked international interest in Marcus's management philosophy, leading to speaking engagements, consulting requests, and invitations to share his story at business schools and corporate conferences around the world. "Mr. Williams," said Dr. Patricia Chen, a professor from Harvard Business School who was interviewing Marcus for a case study, "your company's transformation has become legendary in management circles. Can you explain how you've sustained these improvements over time?" Marcus settled into his chair in the conference room, where he now held weekly meetings with department heads, the same room where he had once been accused of theft by Richard Blackstone. Dr. Chen, the key insight is that sustainable change requires changing systems, not just policies. We didn't just implement new rules, we fundamentally altered how decisions are made and how success is measured. Can you give me a specific example? Certainly. Under the previous management, supervisors were evaluated based on how well they controlled costs and minimized complaints. Under our system, they're evaluated on employee development, problem-solving innovation, and long-term client satisfaction. Dr. Chen made notes as Marcus continued. When you change what behaviors are rewarded, you change what behaviors occur. Our supervisors now spend their time coaching employees and improving processes rather than just enforcing rules. What about resistance from traditional management thinkers? Marcus smiled, thinking about some of the challenges he had faced over the past year. There's definitely been skepticism from people who believe that treating employees well is a luxury that successful companies can't afford. But our financial results have made those arguments difficult to sustain. The financial results were indeed impressive. Meridian Excellence Corporation had grown from managing 53 properties to 78 properties, with revenue increasing by 47% and profit margins improving by 35%. Most remarkably, they had achieved this growth while increasing wages across all positions and expanding employee benefits. Mr. Williams, I understand you've been approached by other companies wanting to implement similar changes. How do you help them understand that this isn't just about being nice to employees? I show them the data. Employee engagement scores directly correlate with client satisfaction, which directly correlates with contract renewals and referrals. Companies that invest in employee well-being see measurable improvements in every business metric that matters. Dr. Chen looked up from her notes. Have you encountered any situations where your approach hasn't worked? Marcus considered the question carefully. We've had to make some personnel changes when supervisors couldn't adapt to collaborative leadership styles. But in every case, the employees who replaced them have been more effective at achieving both human and business objectives. That afternoon, Marcus received a call that would expand his mission beyond his own company. The caller was Senator Elizabeth Warren, who was chairing a congressional committee on corporate accountability. Mr. Williams, I've been following your work at Meridian Excellence Corporation, and I'm impressed by what you've accomplished. I'd like to invite you to testify before our committee about the relationship between employee treatment and corporate performance. Marcus felt both honored and slightly overwhelmed. Senator Warren, I'd be happy to share our experience, but I'm not sure what perspective I could offer that other business leaders couldn't provide. Mr. Williams, you're the only CEO I know who has experienced the American workplace from both the bottom and the top. Your testimony could help us understand how policy changes might encourage more companies to adopt employee-centered practices. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself in a Senate hearing room, preparing to address lawmakers about the business case for treating workers with dignity and respect. The hearing room was packed with reporters, business leaders, and worker advocacy groups. Mr. Williams, Senator Warren began, please tell the committee about your unique journey from janitor to CEO and what it taught you about American workplace culture. Marcus had told his story dozens of times, but speaking to U.S. senators about workplace policy felt particularly significant. He explained his background, his years working as a janitor, his wrongful termination, and his family's acquisition of the company. Senator, what struck me most during my 8 years as a service worker was how often good ideas and important insights came from employees who were never asked for their input. Companies are missing enormous opportunities for improvement because they don't listen to the people who actually do the work. Senator Josh Hawley, a Republican from Missouri, raised a concern that Marcus had heard frequently. Mr. Williams, while your results are impressive, isn't it unrealistic to expect all companies to provide the kind of benefits and wage increases you've implemented? Small businesses operate on much tighter margins. Marcus had prepared for this question by analyzing the scalability of his approaches. Senator Hawley, the most impactful changes we made don't require significant financial investment. Treating employees with respect, soliciting their input on improvements, and creating fair processes for addressing grievances cost almost nothing to implement. But what about the wage increases and expanded benefits? Those investments pay for themselves through reduced turnover, increased productivity, and improved service quality. Even small businesses can afford to invest in employees when they understand the return on that investment. Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota asked about the broader economic implications. Mr. Williams, if more companies adopted your approach, what impact do you think it would have on the American economy? Marcus considered the question's scope. Senator Klobuchar, when employees are treated well, they spend more money in their communities, they're more likely to pursue education and training, and they're more invested in their company's success. The economic benefits extend far beyond individual businesses. After his testimony, Marcus was approached by representatives from dozens of companies interested in implementing similar reforms, but the conversation that made the biggest impact came from an unexpected source. Mr. Williams, said a young woman who introduced herself as Amanda Rodriguez. I'm Elena Rodriguez's daughter. My mom has worked for your company for 6 years, and I wanted to thank you for how much you've changed her life. Marcus remembered Eleanor well, the administrative assistant who had always been kind to him during his janitorial years and whose son he had helped with math homework. Amanda, your mother is one of the most dedicated employees we have. How has her experience changed? Mr. Williams, my mom used to come home stressed and worried about job security every day. She felt like she was invisible to management and that her opinions didn't matter. Now she comes home excited about projects she's working on and proud of the company she represents. I'm glad to hear that. Your mother deserves to feel valued for her contributions. Amanda's voice became emotional. Mr. Williams, it's more than that. Because my mum feels supported at work, she's been able to go back to school to finish her degree. She's studying business administration and wants to move into management herself someday. Marcus felt a deep satisfaction hearing about Elena's educational pursuits. That's wonderful. We have a tuition reimbursement program that can help with her costs. She told me about that. Mr. Williams, you've literally changed the trajectory of our family's future. My mum went from feeling trapped in a dead-end job to believing she can achieve anything she sets her mind to. That evening, Marcus returned to his apartment, the same modest place he had lived during his janitor years. Despite his success and increased income, he had chosen to maintain his simple lifestyle, investing most of his earnings in his employees and his sister's expanding portfolio of company acquisitions. As he prepared dinner, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that morning when Richard Blackstone had fired him for crimes he didn't commit. What had seemed like a devastating setback had become the catalyst for creating positive change in hundreds of lives. His phone rang with a call from Margaret, who was calling with news about their latest acquisition. Marcus, we just closed on Pinnacle Service Industries, a cleaning and maintenance company with 800 employees across 5 states. The previous owners were desperate to sell because of high turnover and declining contracts. Same problems we faced at Meridian. Exactly. Authoritarian management, poor employee treatment, and a culture based on fear rather than respect. But Marcus, this gives us the opportunity to prove that your model can be scaled to much larger operations. Marcus felt excitement about the possibility of transforming workplace culture for hundreds more employees. Maggie, I want to spend the first month visiting every facility and talking directly with employees. We need to understand their specific challenges before implementing changes. I figured you'd say that. Marcus, you've created something remarkable here. What started as personal justice has become a movement that's changing how companies think about employee relations. As Marcus ended the call, he looked out his window at the Chicago skyline and thought about all the people in those buildings who were working for companies that didn't value their contributions or respect their dignity. The kind janitor who had become the boss was just getting started. His mission had evolved from fixing one company to revolutionizing how American businesses treated their most important asset, the people who made their success possible. And somewhere in the city, in offices and factories and service buildings, other employees were dreaming of workplaces where they could feel valued, respected, and proud of the work they did. Marcus Williams was determined to help make those dreams reality, one company at a time. Chapter 7. The Movement Grows. 2 years after taking control of Meridian Excellence Corporation, Marcus Williams stood before a packed auditorium at the University of Chicago's Business School, delivering a lecture that would be live-streamed to over 50,000 viewers worldwide. The lecture series, titled Dignity at Work: Transforming Corporate Culture from the Ground Up, had become one of the most popular business education programs in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, looking out at an audience that included students, professors, CEOs, and worker advocates. I want to start today's discussion with a simple question. What if everything we've been taught about management and motivation is backwards? In the front row sat Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a labor economist from MIT who had been studying the Williams model of employee-centered management. Next to her was James Morrison from the Harvard Business Review, who was documenting the long-term effects of Marcus's approach on corporate performance. Traditional business thinking suggests that companies succeed by minimizing labor costs and maximizing control over employees, Marcus continued. But what if the opposite is true? What if companies succeed by maximizing investment in employees and minimizing unnecessary control? A student raised her hand. Mr. Williams, critics argue that your approach only works in service industries with relatively low skill requirements. How do you respond to claims that employee-centered management wouldn't work in high-tech or manufacturing sectors? Marcus smiled, anticipating the question. That's an excellent point, and it's one we're currently testing. Williams & Associates has acquired 3 manufacturing companies and 2 technology firms over the past 18 months. Let me share some preliminary results. He advanced to his first slide, showing productivity and retention data from their newest acquisitions. At Precision Manufacturing in Detroit, we implemented the same employee engagement principles we used at Meridian. Within 6 months, production efficiency increased by 23%, and workplace accidents decreased by 47%. How is that possible? Asked a professor from the audience. Because when employees feel valued and respected, they become partners in solving problems rather than just following orders. Our factory workers identified dozens of process improvements that management had never considered. Marcus clicked to the next slide, showing financial data from Aurora Tech Solutions, a software development company they had acquired in Silicon Valley. At Aurora Tech, we discovered that programmer turnover was costing the company over $2 million annually in recruitment and training costs. By implementing flexible schedules, employee ownership programs, and collaborative decision-making processes, we reduced turnover by 68%. Dr. Martinez leaned forward with interest. Mr. Williams, can you elaborate on the employee ownership component? How do you structure that? Certainly. We've developed what we call progressive ownership. Employees earn equity stakes in their companies based on tenure, performance, and contributions to workplace improvement. After 3 years, every full-time employee becomes a partial owner of the company where they work. The auditorium buzzed with excited conversations as the audience processed the implications of widespread employee ownership. But Mr. Williams, called out a voice from the back, doesn't employee ownership dilute shareholder value and reduce profits for investors? Marcus had been fielding this question regularly from traditional investors who were skeptical of his approach. Actually, companies with significant employee ownership consistently outperform companies with traditional ownership structures. When employees are owners, they're invested in long-term success rather than just collecting paychecks. He advanced to a comprehensive slide showing 5-year performance data across all Williams & Associates portfolio companies. Our employee-owned companies have achieved an average annual growth rate of 32% compared to an industry average of 8%. Return on investment for our limited partners has been consistently above market rates. After the lecture, Marcus was approached by a delegation from the European Union who had traveled to Chicago specifically to meet with him. Mr. Williams, said Dr. Klaus Weber, Director of Labor Relations for the EU Commission, we've been following your work with great interest. The European Parliament is considering legislation that would incentivize companies to adopt employee-centered management practices. Would you be willing to consult on policy development? Marcus felt both honored and overwhelmed by the international scope of interest in his work. Dr. Weber, I'd be happy to share our experience, but I want to emphasize that sustainable change has to come from within companies, not from external regulation. What do you mean? I mean that companies adopt employee-centered practices because they prove to be more profitable, not because they're forced to by law. Policy can create incentives, but it can't create the cultural transformation that makes these approaches successful. That evening, Marcus returned to his office at Meridian Excellence Corporation to find an unexpected visitor waiting for him. Richard Blackstone sat in the reception area, looking older and more subdued than when Marcus had last seen him during the acquisition negotiations. Richard, Marcus said, genuinely surprised. What brings you here? I wanted to talk to you about something, Marcus. Do you have a few minutes? Marcus led Blackstone to his office, curious about what his former boss could want after 2 years of silence. Marcus, I've been following your success, and I wanted to apologize for how I treated you. Not just the wrongful termination, but the 8 years before that, when I never acknowledged your contributions or treated you with basic respect. Marcus studied Blackstone's expression, looking for signs of insincerity, but finding only genuine remorse. I appreciate the apology, Richard. What prompted this visit? Blackstone shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I've been struggling to find work since leaving here. My reputation in the industry is damaged, but more than that, I've been reflecting on my management style and the way I treated employees throughout my career. And what conclusions have you reached? that I was wrong about everything. I thought leadership meant controlling people and minimizing costs. I never understood that employees could be partners rather than just resources to be exploited. Marcus leaned back, processing Blackstone's admission. Richard, what do you want from me? I want to ask if there's any way I could work for you. Not in management. I understand that would be inappropriate. But in some capacity where I could learn how to treat people the way they deserve to be treated. The request was so unexpected that Marcus needed a moment to respond. The man who had wrongfully fired him was asking for a job with the company he now ran. Richard, that's a significant request. What makes you think you could adapt to our culture after spending decades managing through intimidation? Because I've spent 2 years watching what you've accomplished, and I know that my way of doing business was destructive to everyone involved, including myself. I want to learn how to be a leader who builds people up instead of tearing them down. Marcus considered the request carefully. Hiring Blackstone would be controversial and potentially disruptive to the positive culture they had built, but it would also be the ultimate demonstration of the redemption and second chances that were central to his management philosophy. Richard, if I were to consider this, it would have to be on very specific terms. You'd start in an entry-level position, you'd undergo extensive training on our cultural values, and you'd have to prove that you could embrace collaborative rather than authoritarian approaches. I understand. Marcus, I know I don't deserve this opportunity, but I'm asking for the chance to become the kind of leader I should have been all along. Marcus thought about Elena Rodriguez pursuing her business degree, Jerry Patterson developing innovative security protocols, and the dozens of other employees who had transformed their careers under supportive management. Richard, let me discuss this with my senior team. If they're comfortable with it, we might be able to create a position in our management training program. But I want to be clear, this isn't about giving you your old job back. This is about teaching you to become a completely different kind of leader. That's exactly what I'm hoping for. As Blackstone left that evening, Marcus reflected on the unexpected turn of events. The man who had represented everything wrong with traditional corporate culture was asking to learn a better way of leading people. His phone rang with a call from Margaret, who was calling from their newest acquisition in Phoenix. Marcus, I just finished meetings with the management team at Southwest Service Solutions. They're eager to implement our employee ownership model, but they're worried about resistance from middle management. Same challenge we've faced at every acquisition. Middle managers who advanced under authoritarian systems often struggle to adapt to collaborative leadership. How do you want to handle it here? Marcus thought about his conversation with Blackstone and the possibility of demonstrating that even the most traditional managers could learn to lead differently. Maggie, I want to try something new. Instead of replacing resistant managers, let's create an intensive leadership transformation program. Show them that collaborative leadership is more effective than authoritarian control. You think people can really change their fundamental approach to management? Marcus looked around his office, thinking about his own journey from janitor to CEO and the countless employees who had grown into new roles under supportive leadership. I think people are capable of remarkable transformation when they're given the tools, support, and motivation to change, and I think proving that might be the most important thing we can do for the future of American business. The kind janitor who had become the boss was about to take on his biggest challenge yet, proving that even the worst managers could learn to become leaders who brought out the best in everyone around them. Chapter 8. The Ultimate Test. 3 years after his transformation from janitor to CEO, Marcus Williams faced his greatest challenge yet. Williams and Associates had just acquired Titan Industries, a struggling manufacturing conglomerate, with 12,000 employees across 15 facilities and a corporate culture so toxic that it had become a case study in business schools as an example of how not to manage people. Marcus stood in the main conference room of Titan's headquarters in Cleveland, Ohio, looking out at 47 department heads, plant managers, and executives who had built their careers on the kind of authoritarian management practices he was determined to change. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, facing an audience that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. I know many of you are wondering what a former janitor could possibly teach you about running a manufacturing operation. A voice from the back of the room called out, "We're wondering why our board sold this company to someone whose only qualification is a feel-good story about treating employees like kindergartners." Marcus had expected resistance, but the level of hostility was more intense than anything he had encountered in previous acquisitions. Titan's management culture was built on hierarchy, intimidation, and the belief that employees were costs to be minimized rather than assets to be developed. "I understand your concerns," Marcus replied calmly, "but before we discuss my qualifications, let's review Titan's performance under current management." He advanced to his first slide, showing 3 years of declining revenue, increasing employee turnover, and deteriorating safety records. Titan has lost $47 million over the past 3 years. Employee turnover is averaging 83% annually. Workers' compensation claims have increased by 120%. Customer satisfaction scores are at an all-time low. Plant manager Bill Henderson from the Detroit facility stood up aggressively. "Those numbers are the result of market conditions and global competition, not management practices. You can't solve economic problems by giving employees participation trophies." Marcus had researched Henderson's background and knew he represented the most entrenched resistance to cultural change. "Mr. Henderson, let me ask you something. How many improvement suggestions have you received from your floor workers in the past year?" "What do you mean?" "I mean specific ideas from employees about how to improve efficiency, reduce waste, or enhance safety. How many suggestions have your workers submitted?" Henderson looked confused. "We don't have a suggestion system. Workers are paid to follow procedures, not to redesign them." Marcus clicked to his next slide, showing data from their successful manufacturing acquisition in Detroit. At Precision Manufacturing, which has similar operations to your Detroit plant, employees submitted over 400 improvement suggestions last year. Implementing those suggestions saved the company $2.3 million and reduced workplace accidents by 60%. "That's impossible," Henderson scoffed. "Line workers don't have the knowledge or training to improve manufacturing processes." "Actually, Mr. Henderson, line workers have the most intimate knowledge of manufacturing processes because they perform them every day. They see inefficiencies and safety hazards that engineers and managers miss because they're not on the floor." Dr. Sarah Kim, Titan's Chief Operating Officer, raised a more thoughtful question. "Mr. Williams, assuming you're correct about employee engagement, how do you propose to change a culture that's been in place for decades?" Marcus appreciated the more constructive tone. "Dr. Kim, cultural transformation requires 3 simultaneous changes: new systems that reward collaborative behavior, training that teaches collaborative skills, and leadership that models collaborative values." "Can you be more specific?" "Certainly. We're going to implement a profit-sharing program that gives every employee a stake in the company's success. We're going to create cross-functional teams that include floor workers in process improvement decisions. And we're going to train every supervisor in collaborative leadership techniques." The room erupted in skeptical murmurs and outright objections. Marcus had expected this reaction, but he had also prepared for it. "I know this sounds radical to people who've succeeded under traditional management systems," Marcus continued, "but I want to share something with you that might change your perspective." He clicked to a video testimonial from Jerry Patterson, who had been promoted to Director of Security Operations across all Williams & Associates properties. In the video, Jerry spoke directly to the camera. 3 years ago, I was a security guard who followed orders and kept my mouth shut. Under Mr. Williams' leadership, I've been encouraged to develop new safety protocols, lead training programs, and contribute to company policy decisions. I've grown more in 3 years than I did in the previous 15 years of my career." Marcus followed with testimonials from Elena Rodriguez, now a regional manager after completing her business degree with company support, and Carlos Martinez, a former night janitor who had become a facilities maintenance supervisor. "These aren't isolated success stories," Marcus explained. "They represent a systematic approach to developing human potential that exists in every organization." Plant manager Janet Foster from the Phoenix facility raised her hand. "Mr. Williams, these examples are from service industries. Manufacturing requires precision, efficiency, and strict adherence to procedures. You can't run a production line like a democracy." Marcus had been waiting for this objection. "Ms. Foster, you're absolutely right that manufacturing requires precision and efficiency. But what if I told you that employee engagement actually improves both?" He clicked to a case study from Toyota's manufacturing operations. Toyota has built their entire production system on employee engagement and continuous improvement. Their workers are encouraged to stop the production line whenever they identify a problem or improvement opportunity. That's Toyota. They have a completely different business model. Actually, Ms. Foster, we've been testing similar approaches at precision manufacturing with remarkable results. Let me show you some specific examples. Marcus spent the next hour presenting detailed data from their successful manufacturing transformation, including specific cases where employee suggestions had improved efficiency, reduced waste, and enhanced safety. But the real breakthrough came when he introduced Richard Blackstone, who had been working in their management development program for 6 months. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet someone who might surprise you. Richard Blackstone was my former boss, who fired me for theft I didn't commit. 6 months ago, he asked for a chance to learn collaborative leadership. Richard, would you share your experience? Blackstone stood up nervously, facing an audience of his former peers who knew his reputation for authoritarian management. 3 years ago, I thought leadership meant control, intimidation, and minimizing costs. I fired Marcus because I saw him as a threat to my authority rather than recognizing his potential contributions. Blackstone's voice grew stronger as he continued. Working under Marcus's leadership has taught me that real strength comes from empowering others, not controlling them. What specific changes have you experienced? Marcus prompted. I've learned to listen before speaking, to ask for input before making decisions, and to measure success by how much I help others grow rather than how much authority I exercise. Blackstone looked directly at his former peers. I've been more successful and more fulfilled in 6 months of collaborative leadership than I was in 20 years of traditional management. The room was silent as Titan's managers processed the testimony of someone they had viewed as a kindred spirit in authoritarian leadership. Dr. Kim spoke first. Mr. Blackstone, are you saying you believe Mr. Williams's approach would work in a manufacturing environment? I'm saying it would work in any environment where human beings are involved. People want to contribute, to grow, and to be part of something meaningful. When you give them that opportunity, they'll exceed every expectation. After the meeting, Marcus was approached by several managers who expressed private interest in learning more about collaborative leadership, but he was also confronted by Bill Henderson and 3 other plant managers who made their opposition clear. Williams, you can dress up your approach with fancy presentations and feel-good testimonials, but manufacturing is about results, not emotions. You're going to destroy this company with your naive idealism. Marcus looked at Henderson calmly. Bill, I appreciate your concern for the company's success. That's exactly why we're implementing these changes. But I want you to know that resistance to cultural transformation will be noted in performance evaluations. Are you threatening my job? I'm informing you that collaboration and employee development are now core requirements for management positions at Titan Industries. Managers who can't adapt to these requirements will need to find positions elsewhere. That evening, Marcus sat in his hotel room in Cleveland, video calling Margaret to discuss the day's challenges. Marcus, how bad was the resistance? Significant, but not unexpected. About 30% of the management team seems genuinely interested in learning collaborative approaches. Another 30% is wait and see. The remaining 40% is actively hostile. What's your plan for the hostile group? Marcus had been thinking about this question all day. Same plan we've used everywhere else. Provide training and support for those willing to change. Replace those who aren't. Marcus, replacing 40% of management at a company this size could be disruptive. Maggie, keeping managers who treat employees like disposable resources would be more disruptive. We've proven that collaborative leadership works. Now we have to prove that it can work at scale. As Marcus prepared for bed, he reflected on the magnitude of the challenge ahead. Transforming Titan Industries would require changing the attitudes and behaviors of thousands of employees across 15 facilities. But he had learned that cultural transformation was possible when leaders were committed to treating people with dignity and respect. The kind janitor who had become the boss was about to face the ultimate test of his leadership philosophy. The question wasn't whether collaborative management could work in manufacturing. It was whether American business was ready for the fundamental transformation that Marcus Williams represented. The answer would determine not just the fate of Titan Industries, but the future of workplace culture across the country. Chapter 9. The Transformation Takes Hold. 6 months after acquiring Titan Industries, Marcus Williams walked through the Detroit manufacturing plant, alongside Bill Henderson, the same plant manager who had openly challenged his leadership philosophy during that first contentious meeting in Cleveland. But the man walking beside Marcus now bore little resemblance to the hostile executive who had dismissed employee engagement as kindergarten management. "Marcus, I owe you an apology," Henderson said as they observed the morning shift change. "6 months ago, I thought your approach would destroy productivity and undermine authority. I was completely wrong." They paused at a workstation where Maria Gonzalez, a line worker with 15 years of experience, was training 2 new employees while simultaneously monitoring quality control data on a tablet that hadn't existed under the previous management. "Maria," Marcus called out, "how are the new team members adapting to our cross-training program?" Maria looked up with a smile that would have been unthinkable under the old authoritarian culture. "Mr. Williams, they're doing great. Sarah here spotted a potential efficiency improvement on her second day, and we're testing it this afternoon." Henderson shook his head in amazement. 3 months ago, Maria barely made eye contact with management. Now she's leading training sessions and implementing process improvements. "What changed your mind about employee engagement?" Marcus asked as they continued their tour. "The numbers," Henderson replied without hesitation. "Our productivity is up 37%. Workplace accidents are down 62%, and employee turnover has dropped from 83% to 11%. But more than that, I've seen what happens when people feel valued and empowered." They stopped at a bulletin board displaying the month's employee improvement suggestions. Marcus counted over 40 ideas, ranging from minor safety enhancements to major process redesigns. "Bill, how many improvement suggestions did you receive under the old system?" "0. We had a suggestion box, but nobody ever used it because they knew management wouldn't take their ideas seriously." Henderson's voice carried genuine regret. "We wasted years of valuable insights because we thought workers were just supposed to follow orders." Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah Kim, the former COO who had embraced collaborative leadership with remarkable success. She approached with a tablet displaying real-time production data from all 15 Titan facilities. "Marcus, I wanted to share the quarterly results with you. Overall productivity across all plants is up 41%, costs are down 28%, and customer satisfaction scores have improved by 53%. Marcus felt pride in the transformation, but he was more interested in the human impact. "Sarah, what about employee satisfaction metrics?" "That's the most dramatic change. Employee engagement scores have increased from 23% to 78%. We're actually having trouble keeping up with job applications because word has spread that Titan is a great place to work." Henderson laughed. 6 months ago, we couldn't retain employees. Now we have people driving from other states to work here." As they concluded their plant tour, Marcus received a call from his assistant informing him that a delegation from the Department of Labor was requesting a meeting to discuss Titan's transformation as a potential model for federal workplace policy. That afternoon, Marcus found himself in a video conference with Labor Secretary Julie Rodriguez and several federal policy advisors who had been monitoring Titan's progress. "Mr. Williams," Secretary Rodriguez began, "the transformation at Titan Industries has attracted attention at the highest levels of government. We're interested in understanding how your approach might be scaled to influence workplace culture nationwide." "Madam Secretary, I appreciate the interest, but I want to emphasize that sustainable change has to come from within companies, not from external mandates. The most effective policies would create incentives for employee-centered management rather than requirements." "What kind of incentives do you have in mind?" Marcus had been thinking about this question since his first congressional testimony. "Tax incentives for companies that achieve certain employee satisfaction benchmarks, federal contracting preferences for businesses with low turnover rates, and research funding for organizations studying the relationship between employee engagement and economic performance." Dr. Patricia Lee, a policy advisor specializing in labor relations, raised a concern. "Mr. Williams, critics argue that your approach only works because Williams and Associates carefully selects which companies to acquire. How do we know these methods would work for companies that don't have the luxury of choosing their leadership?" "Dr. Lee, that's exactly why Titan Industries is so important. We didn't choose Titan because it was easy to transform. We chose it because it represented the most challenging test of our philosophy. If collaborative leadership can work in a company with 12,000 employees and decades of toxic culture, it can work anywhere. Secretary Rodriguez leaned forward with interest. Mr. Williams, what would you say to business leaders who argue that employee-centered management is a luxury that companies can't afford during economic downturns? I'd say that employee engagement becomes more important during difficult times, not less important. Companies that maintain employee loyalty and engagement during downturns recover faster and stronger when conditions improve. The call continued for another hour, with policy advisors asking detailed questions about implementation strategies, measurement techniques, and scalability challenges. Marcus answered each question with data from their portfolio companies, but he consistently emphasized that cultural transformation required leadership commitment rather than regulatory compliance. That evening, Marcus attended a dinner hosted by the Detroit Economic Club, where he was scheduled to deliver a keynote address about the future of American manufacturing. The audience included CEOs from major corporations, labor union leaders, and government officials interested in economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, looking out at an audience that represented the traditional power structure of American business. I want to talk to you tonight about the most underutilized resource in American manufacturing, the creativity and dedication of the people who actually make things. He clicked to his first slide, showing comparative productivity data from Titan's facilities before and after implementing employee engagement practices. Traditional manufacturing thinking suggests that efficiency comes from strict control, detailed procedures, and minimal worker autonomy. But what if the opposite is true? What if efficiency comes from worker empowerment, collaborative problem-solving, and shared ownership of results? A voice from the audience called out, "Mr. Williams, your results at Titan are impressive, but how do we know they're sustainable? Employee satisfaction programs often show initial improvements that fade over time." Marcus had prepared for this skepticism by documenting long-term results from their earlier acquisitions. That's an excellent question. Let me share 3-year performance data from our first manufacturing acquisition. He advanced to comprehensive charts showing sustained improvements in productivity, safety, and employee retention at Precision Manufacturing over 36 months. What you see here isn't a temporary boost from new management attention. This represents fundamental changes in how work gets done when employees are treated as partners rather than just labor costs. After his presentation, Marcus was approached by Janet Foster, the Phoenix plant manager who had initially been skeptical about applying collaborative leadership to manufacturing operations. "Marcus, I wanted you to know that implementing your approach has been the most rewarding experience of my management career. I've learned more about effective leadership in 6 months than I did in the previous 20 years. What specific changes have you noticed, Janet?" "The biggest change is that I spend my time developing people and solving systemic problems instead of just enforcing compliance. My employees come to me with ideas instead of just problems. And honestly, I'm having more fun at work than I've ever had." Marcus smiled, recognizing the satisfaction that came from leading through empowerment rather than control. "Janet, you've discovered what I learned during my years as a janitor, that the most fulfilling work comes from helping others succeed." As Marcus prepared to return to Chicago the next morning, he received an unexpected call from Richard Blackstone, who had been promoted to Regional Training Director, after demonstrating exceptional growth in collaborative leadership skills. "Marcus, I wanted to update you on the Management Development Program. We now have 67 former authoritarian managers who have successfully transitioned to collaborative leadership styles." "That's remarkable, Richard. What's been the key to their transformation?" "Honestly, it's been seeing the results. When managers witness firsthand how much more effective they become when they empower employees instead of controlling them, the change becomes obvious." "Any managers who haven't been able to adapt?" "We've had to replace about 15% of middle management across our portfolio companies. But Marcus, the managers we've developed through the program are now more effective leaders than the ones they replaced." That afternoon, as Marcus flew back to Chicago, he reflected on how far Titan Industries had come in just 6 months. What had started as the ultimate test of employee-centered management had become proof that collaborative leadership could transform even the most entrenched corporate cultures. But more importantly, Titan's success was inspiring other companies to question their own management practices. Marcus's phone was constantly ringing with requests from CEOs who wanted to learn how to replicate Titan's transformation. The movement that had started with a wrongfully fired janitor was becoming a revolution in American business culture, and Marcus Williams, the kind man who had been dismissed as insignificant, had become the leader of that revolution. The question now wasn't whether collaborative leadership worked, it was how quickly American business would embrace the fundamental changes necessary to unlock the potential that existed in every workplace. Chapter 10. Full Circle. 5 years after being wrongfully terminated as a janitor, Marcus Williams stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York, addressing delegates from 193 countries about the global implications of workplace dignity and employee empowerment. The speech was being broadcast live to millions of viewers worldwide and would be translated into dozens of languages. Honorable delegates, Marcus began, looking out at an audience that represented every corner of the global economy. I stand before you today not as a business leader or policy expert, but as someone who has experienced the American workplace from both its lowest and highest positions. In the audience sat Margaret Williams, now recognized as one of the most successful private equity managers in the world, alongside Dr. Patricia Chen from Harvard Business School, who had written extensively about the Williams model of employee-centered management. 5 years ago, I was fired from my job as a janitor based on false accusations. Today, the company that fired me has become the flagship of a portfolio that employs over 75,000 people across 12 countries, all operating under the principle that human dignity and business success are not just compatible, they're inseparable. The transformation had indeed been remarkable. Williams and Associates had grown from a regional private equity firm to an international organization specializing in acquiring underperforming companies and transforming them through employee empowerment. Their portfolio companies consistently outperformed market averages while maintaining the highest employee satisfaction scores in their respective industries. The question before us today, Marcus continued, is not whether treating employees with dignity and respect is morally right. We know it is. The question is whether the global economy is ready to embrace business practices that unlock human potential rather than merely exploiting human labor. Ambassador Elena Santos from Spain raised her hand during the question period. Mr. Williams, your success is inspiring, but how do we encourage the adoption of employee-centered practices in countries with different economic systems and cultural values? Marcus had been working with international organizations for 2 years, helping companies in Europe, Asia, and South America implement collaborative management practices adapted to their specific cultural contexts. Ambassador Santos, we've learned that respect for human dignity transcends cultural boundaries. The specific practices may vary, but the core principle, that employees perform better when they feel valued and empowered, applies universally. Can you give us specific examples? Certainly. In Japan, we've worked with manufacturing companies to integrate traditional concepts of continuous improvement with employee ownership. In Germany, we've helped engineering firms expand their already strong worker participation models. In Brazil, we've assisted service companies in developing leadership training programs that emphasize collaboration over hierarchy. Dr. Wei Chen, representing the International Labour Organization, asked about the economic implications of widespread adoption of employee-centered practices. Mr. Williams, if your management philosophy were adopted globally, what impact do you predict on economic inequality and social stability? Marcus had been studying this question with economists from multiple universities. Dr. Chen, our research suggests that employee-centered management practices would significantly reduce economic inequality by creating more opportunities for advancement and shared prosperity. He advanced to a slide showing income distribution data from their portfolio companies compared to industry averages. Companies that implement profit sharing, employee ownership, and advancement opportunities create broader wealth distribution. When employees become stakeholders rather than just workers, the benefits of economic growth are shared more equitably. After his UN address, Marcus was approached by delegations from 15 countries interested in developing pilot programs based on his approach. But the conversation that moved him most came from an unexpected source. "Mr. Williams," said a young woman who introduced herself as Carmen Rodriguez, "I'm Elena Rodriguez's daughter. My mother has told me so much about how you changed her life." Marcus remembered Elena well, the administrative assistant who had always been kind to him during his janitor years and who had since earned her business degree and become a regional manager. "Carmen, your mother is one of our most successful managers. How is she doing?" "She's amazing, Mr. Williams, but I wanted to tell you something that you might not know. Because my mum succeeded in business, my younger brother was able to go to college. Because she felt valued at work, she had the confidence to pursue her dreams. Because you treated her with respect, our entire family's future changed." Carmen's voice became emotional. "Mr. Williams, there are thousands of families like ours whose lives have been transformed because you proved that treating people well is good business. You didn't just change companies, you changed generations." That evening, Marcus returned to Chicago for a celebration marking the 5th anniversary of his acquisition of Meridian Excellence Corporation. The event was held in the same building where he had worked as a janitor, but the atmosphere was completely different from the sterile hierarchical environment of 5 years earlier. The celebration was attended by employees from across their portfolio companies, including many who had been promoted from entry-level positions to management roles. Jerry Patterson, now Director of Security Operations for all Williams & Associates properties, served as Master of Ceremonies. 5 years ago, Jerry announced to the packed auditorium, many of us worked for companies where we felt invisible, unvalued, and trapped in dead-end jobs. Tonight, we're celebrating the proof that every person has potential that's just waiting for the right leadership to unlock it. Marcus took the podium to address the crowd, but before he could speak, Elena Rodriguez approached the microphone. "Mr. Williams, before you say anything, the employees across all our companies have something for you." She gestured to the back of the auditorium, where a large screen displayed a video montage of messages from employees around the world. Janitors in Tokyo, factory workers in Detroit, software developers in Austin, and customer service representatives in Sao Paulo all shared stories about how their lives had been transformed by working for companies that valued their contributions. The final message came from Richard Blackstone, now managing a successful consulting firm that helped other companies implement collaborative leadership practices. "Marcus," Blackstone said, looking directly into the camera, "5 years ago I fired you because I saw you as a threat to my authority. Today I run a company that teaches other leaders the principles you've demonstrated. You taught me that real strength comes from lifting others up, not keeping them down. Thank you for showing me who I could become." As the video concluded, Marcus felt tears in his eyes. The journey from wrongfully terminated janitor to global advocate for workplace dignity had been challenging, but seeing the impact on individual lives made every obstacle worthwhile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying the emotion of the moment, "5 years ago I thought my career was over because one person chose to treat me unfairly. Tonight, I'm surrounded by tens of thousands of people whose careers are just beginning because we chose to treat each other with dignity and respect." He looked out at the audience, seeing faces that reflected the diversity and potential that existed in every workplace. "What we've proven together is that business success and human dignity aren't competing values, they're the same value. When companies invest in people, those people create remarkable results. When employees feel valued, they create value for everyone around them." Marcus concluded his remarks with a challenge that would shape the next phase of his mission. "Our work isn't finished. There are millions of employees around the world who still work for companies that see them as costs rather than assets. There are thousands of leaders who still manage through fear rather than inspiration. And there are countless opportunities to prove that treating people well is the smartest business strategy ever invented." 6 months later, Marcus received a call that would take his mission in a completely new direction. The caller was Dr. Sarah Martinez, Secretary of Education, who was inviting him to develop a new business curriculum focused on ethical leadership and employee empowerment. "Mr. Williams, we want to ensure that the next generation of business leaders understands from the beginning that success comes from empowering others, not controlling them. Would you consider developing a program that teaches collaborative leadership as a core business skill?" Marcus felt excitement about the opportunity to influence how future leaders were trained. "Dr. Martinez, I'd be honored to contribute to that kind of educational transformation. As Marcus began planning the curriculum that would teach collaborative leadership to business students around the world, he reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought him from a janitor's closet to the global stage. The wrongful termination that had once seemed like the end of his story had become the beginning of a movement that was transforming workplace culture around the world. The kind janitor who had been fired for no reason had become the boss not just of his own company, but of a revolution in how businesses treated their most important asset, the people who made their success possible. And in boardrooms and factory floors, in offices and warehouses, in companies large and small around the globe, millions of employees were discovering that work could be more than just a paycheck. It could be a source of dignity, growth, and shared prosperity. Marcus Williams had proven that kindness wasn't weakness, that empowerment wasn't chaos, and that treating people well wasn't just morally right. It was the most profitable business strategy ever discovered. The janitor's revolution was complete, but its impact would continue transforming lives for generations to come.